What are we doing? Oh, I thought we were doing.
That's fine.
What? One more.
Should we do Nicollet? Should we do Nicollet Island, guys?
Should we do Daniels too?
Yeah, Danielson, Drottningen.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess it is on. Good morning, everyone. Normally when I am here to speak to a group of people, my role is to express just how delighted I am that the audience has joined us for a program that I'm about to introduce. I'm a bit disoriented today, don't get me wrong. I am glad, very glad to see you all, and I'm grateful for the privilege of us gathering together in tribute to a dear friend and colleague, though it's not a moment that I ever imagined would have come with such suddenness earlier this year. So welcome to the American Swedish Institute, to this gathering and celebration of the life of our dear friend and colleague, Kurt Peterson, who made so many contributions to the cultural and fine arts communities in Minnesota and who is fondly remembered and deeply missed by so many. I want to thank you in advance for observing our preference that you wear a mask while here in Larson Hall for the next 55 minutes or so, as we do our best to protect one's health. We'll adjourn after the program to our courtyard. It looks like the weather is clearing, where we can be in the fresh air and enjoy some pastries and coffee, joining together in a fika in the spirit of Kurt. I have more extensive comments later, but for now I simply want to set the stage for this morning's program. In the interest of this being a little bit more flowing, I'll not be popping up here on the stage for each introduction, but rather introduce all who will appear here at this time. You may know that Kurt was a musician among many other talents who loved all forms of music, widely ranging from classic to traditional folk. He also possessed a particular affection for organs, and in fact was an organ builder. One of the organs in which he participated in constructing was the organ at Hennepin Avenue Methodist Church. He managed to add 3 harmoniums to our collections over the years, and if we had had the space and let him loose, he would have added many more. In honor of his interests, we have been enjoying gathering music performed by the ensemble known as Sharon Bloom. They are Cheryl Paschke on nyckelharpa, Joe Alfano, mandolin, Val Eng, harmonium, and Aaron Walsh, cello. Later in the program, they will play a special piece in tribute to Kurt, composed by Torbjörn Nesbø, entitled Homage til en Spellemann, or Tribute to a Musician. And Val Eng will perform a solo piece by Bach on the harmonium, Great God, Our Source, a Palladium in F major. And you should really feel free to show your appreciation to their musicianship with your applause. The first speaker who will address us will be the Reverend Truett Lawson. Truett is a past chair of the ASI Board of Trustees. He is a collector of ceramics and more broadly of Swedish heritage, art, furnishings, and objects. He will speak about Kurt in the context of the many years that Kurt spent stewarding our collections. Following Truett, we will hear from Carl Reichert, a good friend who serves as the executive director of the Textile Center. Kurt was on the board of trustees of the Textile Center at the time of his death. Many people know Kurt through his long association with the Minnesota State Fair. How many of you paid a visit to the Creative Activities Building in August, where he reigned and where he dealt with an incredible range of creative submissions ranging from pickles to quilts. Susan Larson Fleming will speak to that. She worked with Kurt at the State Fair, and she will speak to that dimension of Kurt's life. When Kurt became our curator, he inherited a dedicated group of volunteers originally formed by his predecessor, Linda Franzen, who I saw just now in the audience. This group continues to come every Monday to tend to the cleaning and care of the Turnblad Mansion, as well as its collections. Andrea Bloom has been a part of the Monday crew for many years. She is not able to be here in person, but you will hear from her in recorded comments that will be projected on the screen to your left. Michael Bjornberg is a preservation architect. He's also a member of the American Swedish Institute Board of Trustees. He was a part of the architectural team that designed the Nelson Cultural Center, which was opened in 2012. And Michael appears with Kurt on a recently produced Mansion Musings video that's available on our website. And he will talk about Kurt as steward of the Turnblad Mansion. We'll hear from Kurt's family, Jean, Mara, who have been very much on our minds and in our prayers these days ever since we received the distressing news in February. After I share some concluding thoughts, we'll hear 2 more selections from Sharon Bloom, and then adjourn to the courtyard for refreshments and for more music and some conversation and fellowship. So right now, having set the stage, permit me to turn the podium over to my good friend, the Reverend Truett Lawson.
Good Good morning. Gene and family, I'm honored to pay tribute to Kurt. Kurt was a man of faith. He loved his Lutheran traditions and his liturgical traditions and what is active there. He was, as he would believe, created in the image of God. I'm not going to talk about the metaphysics of that, only that from the book of Jeremiah, we have this wonderful image of the potter and the clay, and God forming an image from the earth and the sky, placing every bit of beauty and intellect, and creating humanity. And if I can push you a little further, let's imagine a week of such creative activity, towards the end of which the Creator finishes his work, only to see that there's a bit smaller a bit of clay there. And he picks it up and decides to freestyle. And he pounds it, and he kneads it, and he shapes it, and he looks at it, and he says, Kurt Pedersen, it's good. And he takes a stamp, and he stamps it unique, U-N-I-K. Because you see, Kurt was an extraordinarily unique man, a very special man. I became active in ASI about 15 or 16 years ago, and I was introduced to Kurt by a staff member who leaned over to me after the introduction when Kurt had stepped aside and said, you know, many of us feel that Kurt is a treasure in the American Swedish Institute. He's preserved our collections. He's enriched our spaces. He's kept our mansion in a state of beauty. And we all would agree with that. What surprised me, however, was the opportunity to get to know Kurt as a person, much to my delight. You see, I have a bad case of frustrated art syndrome. I latently am a bit mad at God that he molded me in my clay and did not infuse in me the vision and talents of an artist. And so I do what many of us do. I compensated and turned into a collector. And a collector of beautiful objects and images that I wish I had made or could make. Enter Kurt Pedersen, a man of extraordinary taste and beauty, who helps me with my syndromes and is what I would call a classic artist and urban archaeologist. And I like both because I'm a collector as well. I would find myself coming here to enjoy coffee with Bruce or to just enjoy the environment that I appreciated so much about the American Swedish Institute, only to see myself saying once in a while, "Where's Kurt? Where's Kurt?" And then we'd trace down where Kurt was, and it might be a little corner up in the mansion or in a remote office or down in the gatherings of the treasures of the institution. But if I found him, it was a very special day, because I'd often hear, "Come here, I want to show you something." A treasure, a curiosity, an artifact. A treasure, wow, Kurt, where'd this come from? This is a beautiful thing. A curiosity, oh my, that's odd. How did we end up with this? Or an artifact, something about the Turnblads or the mansion that only Kurt seemed to know. I think my interest in all of this and ours honored him, and he honored me. The book of Romans says, be the best at showing honor to each other. And I enjoyed this. But more than just personal observations, Kurt made a mark on this institution. Kurt did not light up a room. In fact, if there was a room full of people, he'd probably look for a way out. He'd get lost there. But he left a glow in every room in this mansion and in this new facility. Each exhibition, its emotional content and its beauty were special because of his talent. He quietly courted people like me and convinced us that when we pass on, we should leave our good stuff with the place that will value it. Kurt's death pierced me as well. Don't recall recently being so deeply pierced. We were in Mexico. We were just shocked. And so I deeply miss him. There's a verse in John, though, that has kind of encouraged me. It says, in my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. Jesus speaking. I go to prepare a place for you. I love that picture. The steward of a mansion here reassigned to a mansion there. You've been promoted, Kurt.
Good morning. I'm Carl Reichert, the Executive Director for Textile Center, and it's an honor to be here today. Kurt Pedersen's election to the Board of Directors of Textile Center in 2019 came by way of Danish spoons. As our nominating committee was considering prospects for our board, President-elect Mariana Scholstad nominated Kurt and spoke of her admiration for his leadership in our arts and cultural community. She recounted a delightful experience she and her husband, Craig, had working with Kurt to select spoons from their cherished Danish collection for use in one of ASI's Nordic Christmas rooms of that year. Of course, as soon as Kurt's name was raised during that nominating committee, many of us enthusiastically shared stories about our connections to this amazing, soft-spoken man who had a gift to uplift everyone who shared his creative spirit. Earlier this year, Kurt was completing his third term on Textile Center's board of directors, and we were thrilled that he agreed to serve a second term. He was an invaluable member of our facilities committee, and he contributed his wisdom and expertise to our organization's new 5-year strategic plan. In the fiber art community, Kurt was admired by hundreds, well, I think we could say thousands of artists and makers who submitted their work for exhibition each year at the Minnesota, or over the years, at the Minnesota State Fair Creative Activities. It was a span of 40 years. Textile Center's Director for Artistic Advancement, Tracy Crum, spent a lot of time with Kurt in creative activities in recent years, and she shares this, quote, perhaps Kurt's greatest contribution to the fiber art community is from his stewardship of textiles at every opportunity and helping to nurture it as one of the primary activities, neck and neck with canned and baked goods, featured in Creative Activities building. It was at Creative Activities where the relationship with Textile Center, the Weavers Guild of Minnesota, and other textile guilds really grew for him. He was pivotal in publicly celebrating the work of fiber artists. He was a true champion of the work of people and all creative activity. He brought together the hobbyist, the appreciator, the beginner, and the professional, and he publicly recognized the contribution of fiber artists across the state. He helped us celebrate everyone who wanted to participate. This week, we are observing the second anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. As our community became the epicenter of the nationwide protest movement that followed 2 years ago, Textile Center and Women of Color Quilters Network began work on conceiving We Are the Story, a multi-venue art quilt exhibition for the Twin Cities that would bring together quilters from across the nation in addressing police brutality and racism in America. Once our curator, Carolyn Mazlumi, established the concept for 7 art quilt exhibitions, Kurt promptly facilitated the American Swedish Institute as the first organization to step forward as an exhibition collaborator. This provided the momentum we needed to make We Are the Story a reality. By September 2020, amid this pandemic, we launched our first exhibition at Textile Center and another at ASI. Kurt's mounting of the Women of Color Quilters Network show, We Who Believe in Freedom, was exquisitely presented from September 10th through November 1st in 2020 in the Osher Gallery. I cherish my memories of walking through the exhibit with Kurt as he shared his process for mounting the show. He wanted to ensure that the messages conveyed by the works of our nation's most renowned quilters would be received by all visitors. On behalf of Textile Center and fiber artists everywhere, I want to express gratitude for all Kurt accomplished as a tireless champion of craft. Today, Minnesota enjoys a vibrant fiber art scene, and Kurt played a major role in making it so. Thank you.
See many of you in the audience that I usually see in August, but I first met Kurt when he was up on a ladder painting the ceiling here at the American Swedish Institute. A few years later, he called me, asked me to work at the State Fair. Down a little. Thank you. I think you'll like this, he said. Of course, I had been to the fair, but I had never thought about working there. You might be right. Okay. Of course, he was right. He wasn't the superintendent then, he was the assistant to Evelyn Hagan. When she finally stepped down after 50 years, he became superintendent of creative activities. What an appropriate title. And then in early August of 1994, I started. I had a mentor, Betty Pollitt. In her southern drawl, she showed me where and how to enter names and addresses on the 4x6 cards, lot and entry number on the entry tags, and where and how to attach the tags on the items. As I sat with her at the entries table, I talked with the people around me, all engaged in the same multifaceted entry process. I soon came to realize the depth of talent that surrounded me, the kindness, the quirkiness, and the deep affection that all held for Kurt. I had entered a little village whose sole purpose was to create a museum. First, prepare the paperwork. Greet those who offered their work for judging and display, the timid and the overconfident. Treat all with respect. Make sure by our work that the item entered could be found once again. If someone questioned the clerk's decision of which category to use, well, then Kurt would be called to arbitrate. Rarely did anyone leave angry, even though we may have rolled our eyes later. The sorting, the judging, the placement of the thousands of objects in the glass cases left over from the former women's building, demolished many years ago. We had our rituals. Get there early. Arlene has the key. Where are the lights? Hugs for all our old friends. Is Barb there to make the coffee? Paperwork ready up front. How close to the entry door should we be, Wendy? Where are the pencils, the little safety pins, the tape measure? Do we have state fair pins to give away? Paperwork lined up, time for coffee. Are people waiting outside? How long is the line? Time for Kurt to give us instructions. We forget every year, but quickly remember. A few days for people to bring in their entries, then Tuesday potluck. Salads, bars, casseroles. Kurt has made sangria. The judges are here. Most of the entries are sorted. Who are we clerking for? Most of us already know. Been the same for a few years. We won't get the paperwork right away from the main office, but still some things can be done. Judging forms, pencils, carbon paper. Carrie has been eyeing the entries for a few days, deciding on exhibit placement. As soon as things are judged, the exhibits start to fill. Kurt is there late every night, climbing into cases, placing the lace tablecloths, securing the postcards into the revolving cases, making sure. When the fair opened, our jobs were over for now. It was Kurt and Arlene, perhaps Jean and Mara, who would remain during the fair in the little office behind the Dutch door to answer questions. Where are the mittens I submitted? I can't find them in the exhibit. To hear a complaint, it's upside down. The wrong side is showing. And once the doors had closed, to crawl into a case and flip the crocheted piece. When the doors closed for the final time on Labor Day, Kurt and a few others would ready the building for the next day, set up the tables, cover them with brown paper, categories would once again be marked. The next day we were back to empty the cases, sort the items into categories, start to match the objects to the paperwork, 1.5 days to remove everything, pack them up for returning at 1 o'clock on Wednesday. And then Thursday afternoon, what remained would get packed up and taken to the main office. We had time for a final lunch with the anxiously awaited raffle of free coupons, pie plates, and miscellany that Kurt had gathered during the fair. And always the stories to accompany each item as he pulled the winning entries from a box. How we laughed. And then at 5:30 or so on Thursday afternoon, it was all over. The process reversed. The museum closed. We hugged and said our goodbyes, most of us fully expecting to be there together next year. And here we are, but it's the end of May, not early August. It's too soon.
Good morning. I knew Kurt for 45 years. I first met Kurt when he took a stained glass class I taught at the University of Minnesota. We were also students in the university's design department together. After the university, we would run into each other here at ASI, where he was helping restore the painted plaster ceilings and I was working with a glass collection. Kurt loved the mansion and the people. In turn, he was loved by so many, especially our group of hand-picked volunteers. He truly curated our Monday volunteer group. He had this incredible knack for bringing people from a variety of backgrounds together, utilizing their talents, making everything that much better, and much more fun in the process. He inspired loyalty. We would do anything for him. When Kurt needed additional people, he would ask the group if they knew of anyone who would make a good addition. Before being asked to join Kurt's cadre, several of the Monday volunteers, Cheryl Olson and Jean Seeloff, had previously been tour guides at ASI. Bev Norris also was a longtime volunteer with the curators at ASI. Susan Larson Fleming was a founder of the Svenska Skolan and had previously worked at the Hennepin History Museum in exhibit design and as an archivist. Arlene Rested could always be depended on for sewing projects, displays, and great banana bread. Warren Olson was a business owner with an art background. Kristen Ingerson and Beth Kaluza brought their computer skills from the Federal Reserve. Gordy Rosine and Jack Anderson had both been electrical engineers and brought their skills with them. Melissa Hansen did styling for photo shoots and makes great cookies. Phyllis Wagner worked in weaving and fiber arts. 5 of us, Melissa, Phyllis, Sean, Kurt, and I, were all products of the U of M's design department. This exemplifies the diversity of people and talent that Kurt brought together at ASI. Many of us also worked at the State Fair with Kurt. Invited into the Monday volunteer group, we assisted Kurt with exhibitions, care of collections, and upkeep around the mansion. Exhibition openings were usually an exciting dash to the last hour, tweaking small things, making sure Kurt's creative vision was perfectly presented. Kurt was a modest man with a droll sense of Scandinavian humor. Being generous with his time and having genuine interest in people would often make him late for meetings. When asked about favorite memories, many in our group mentioned the Waffeldagen and our annual Esterfika, an old Swedish tradition of drinking coffee from saucers, cooling it enough to drink. Some would grouse about it, but it was always fun to reenact a Herman Rosell wood carving, complete with tablecloths. Kurt had an eye for detail and enjoyed imparting goofy traditions. As one person commented, "We all love our Swedish heritage. With Kurt, we could live it." Kurt was a good storyteller, and he had connections everywhere, from Hopkins Center for the Arts and Elk River Arts Center in Minnesota to the Glass Factory and Glass Museum in Småland, Sweden, and the Immigrant Center in Värmland, Sweden, to name a few. Kurt was well regarded wherever he went. Stories, digressions, how gentle and funny he was, so kind and considerate, never cross or complaining, unassuming, creative, humble, flexible, not critical, an eye for art, mutual respect, congenial are words people used in describing Kurt. Kurt loved the ASI. Retirement was never in his plans. He loved what he did. Today, as we celebrate your life, Kurt, we hope someone finds you a bit of pastry to join us in celebration of your life, well lived.
Greetings to all who've come to share stories and memories of our beloved Kurt Pedersen. And thank you for being here in support of his legacy. He was and still is a very special person. He will not be forgotten. I suspect there will be stories of Kurt sightings in the mansion for years ahead. His presence will be felt. It'll be that over thing. Are you sure you want to do it that way? My experiences with Kurt span over 12 years, dating back to 2010 as we were interviewing for this project here. And he would grab me and say, "You got to come over and see this." That never ended. And it was wonderful. From the time we first spoke, I knew we had a common love of telling stories and a really special love for the Turnblad Mansion. Kurt eagerly showed me about the mansion, showing me hidden places I didn't know existed. His enthusiasm was contagious, and his passion was worn on both sleeves. I would marvel at all he knew about the mansion and admired his creativity in working with the mansion in a sensitive way, and it was always a challenge. Kurt loved working with the mansion. His creativity in developing exhibits equaled the grandeur of the mansion. They are works of a master. Kurt knew the personality of the mansion, and together they created magic for us all to enjoy. He was the ASI Magic Man. After my first visit, I would look forward to subsequent visits and always keep an eye out for Kurt. We all talk about Kurt sightings. No visit was complete without a Kurt encounter. As the years went by and we began working together in the Cultural Center, me listening and Kurt talking, I soaked up all he knew and would allow him to do exhibits fully in the mansion. If I did not see him about the facility, I would drop down and swing by his office to see if he was there. If so, I knew we could chat, share fika in his laboratory. And there was, from the pictures, a bit of a scientist with him in his white lab coat. Fascinated me. I just loved it. It was endearing. There's a Scandinavian folklore character known as the Nisser, the household guardian, also the prankster. I have to think that Kurt would certainly be the ASI Nisser, a true steward of the Turnblad Mansion and always a clever trick up his sleeve. So Kurt Pedersen, the Magic Man, the ASI Nisser, the artist, the ambassador, the steward of the Turnblad Mansion, and above all, a friend. Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to welcome each and every one of you for coming today. Mara and I greatly appreciate this showing of concern for Kurt and all your love and cares. We would like to tell you we miss him very much, but for me, seeing him up there today, I felt the life. He always had an inner spark that came out in the pictures. Mara got used to the Swedish Institute when she was a young girl and used to sit on the 3rd floor in the curved window. She would go up there and fantasize and go into the tower area and think she was a princess. But I didn't think I was a princess when I came over here. I enjoyed the Institute and all the people connected with it. And we are not speaking long today, but we really want to thank each and every one of you for being here. Thank you.
More likely than not, when a person first met Kurt, they would receive a smile and an invitation. Let's have coffee first. How many of you have had that experience? It really was that gentle curiosity and friendliness which led many of our staff and volunteers to say that they often felt that Kurt was their first friend at the American Swedish Institute. He always took the time to have a conversation with anyone new and to help them feel a part of this place. He had a great fondness, as we've heard from several people, for coffee and donuts or any kind of pastry, really. Cake donuts were the best. And he regularly shared fika with so many people each day. He even had an adventurous nature about food. A recent new colleague said that Kurt had mentioned a very interesting new flavor, Oreos with mustard. I'm waiting for that to be submitted to the state fair. And there was something in the way that Kurt described it that made it too fascinating not to try. And so he did, and he thought it wasn't bad. I must confess to being a bit jealous that even with all those fikas, Kurt could still fit into the yellow leisure suit that he bought for himself after college for his interview outfit, and you saw it on the screen. I'm convinced that Kurt's particular genius and his strongest characteristic was in giving each person his full attention. When you were speaking with Kurt, he wasn't multitasking. You were his focus, and he gave that to you freely, irrespective of what else was on his plate at the time. Many people have said here today, you could always stop to chat with Kurt in the hallway. An unexpected visitor would be able to grab some time with Kurt, even if it meant that he had to spend extra hours late at night to finish up work here at ASI. You might call that radical hospitality. Kurt's ability to focus on others had this unique quality to it. One of my colleagues remembers a Christmas event in the early 1990s when Kurt played the role of Father Christmas. Imagine Kurt as Father Christmas in a magnificent, bulky, silvery white costume, complemented by a thick, fake beard. He sat on a throne-like chair, and people of all ages were invited up to sit on Father Christmas's knee and talk about their wishes for Christmas. My colleague was one of those who sat on his knee. And for those moments, Even though she knew it was Kurt, the fact that he was so focused on her in his regalia and had so fully embodied the role. And what would you like for Christmas, little girl? Have you been a good girl? In that moment, Kurt was so believable that she too felt that, yes, this really was Father Christmas. And that's a tremendous gift. He also didn't mean Julia Child, by the way. Kurt was a man whose quiet nature hid a range of talents: artist, designer, encyclopedic source about our collections, organ builder, accompanist, actor, preservationist, exhibit impresario, trusted friend, maker of milkshakes, dependable colleague, caring husband, doting father. He was described by many as patient and thoughtful, and he always had a solution for anything that might come up, especially if it was a problematic issue with an exhibit or the styling of a space. He had all sorts of things tucked away in cubby holes that he could draw upon. He was my colleague and friend for 32 plus years, but his association with ASI was longer, dating back to the early 1980s when he was here working to help restore many of the decorative ceilings. Jean shared with me a story, some of you have heard this, so bear with me, that Kurt came home in 1981 after a full day of working on the Grand Hall ceiling. Those of you familiar with it will know that there are beautiful cherubs sculpted in the ceiling, and that ceiling had long been whitewashed, and so Kurt and his colleague Marv Anderson were animating the ceiling by transforming it from white to Technicolor. On that day, some older members of the Institute had expressed a concern to Kurt. They had noticed several of the semi-nude cherubs on the ceiling and felt that the result of Kurt's work caused their bottoms to be too sexy. And they pleaded with him to please tone them down a little bit. I'm not sure exactly how Kurt modified the restoration, but I'm sure he was quite diplomatic and did what he could to assuage their concerns. I'm going to close by reading a tribute that was sent to me just a few days ago by Kerstin Hagsgård, a curator at the Royal Palace in Stockholm, with whom Kurt worked. I think this might give you a sense, an insight into how Kurt engaged with people and never forgot them. And so this is from the Royal Palace, Stockholm. Dear Jean, Mara, and all friends of Kurt, sometimes you meet someone who changes your life. One such encounter was when I met Kurt. The Royal Collections at the Royal Palace had received an inquiry from ASI if one of their representatives could come and meet with one of our curators. He wanted to come on Maundy Thursday, Holy Thursday, in 2004. Most of the staff was already away on Easter vacation, but I was still at work and was asked to receive him. Kurt arrived, and I immediately found him sympathetic. He was far from the stereotypical image many Swedes have of Americans. His modest and low-key attitude made it possible for him to open many doors and connect with people. Kurt had come to ask if it was possible to borrow some porcelain and glass from the Royal Collections for a small exhibition. The king approved the request, and I was the lucky one to travel as a courier and to make my first visit to Minnesota. 20 years earlier, my brother had spent a year at Minnesota Law School, and my parents visited him, and when they returned home, they talked about an amazing house that they had visited, ASI. And so finally, I was going to be able to visit it myself. Arriving at ASI, I was welcomed by Kurt, and I immediately felt at home. I have traveled as a courier many times to different museums in Europe. You arrive, you deliver your items, you go home. That's it. But to step into ASI was something different, not only for the Swedish connections, but for the warm and friendly atmosphere that Kurt and others helped to create. When I was to return home shortly before Christmas, Kurt and Jean handed over a package of whole coffee beans, reindeer-bled caribou coffee. My fiance Gunnar and I had to buy a coffee grinder, and that marked a turning point in our habits on how to drink coffee.
And ever since that package, we have always ground a coffee ourselves, and it became a tradition that Kurt always sent us reindeer blend at Christmas. We treated our guests every Christmas with that and talked about the friend who had been so kind enough to send it. He also sent us 2 thermos jugs, which we use on our picnics and think of Kurt. Everyone who knows Kurt remembers his love of organs, especially playing them. At a visit to the Royal Palace when I was not present, he asked the palace organist if he might play the organ. Normally, she never lets strangers play the organ, but with Kurt's gentle manners, he was allowed to try. Only someone like Kurt could pull that off. Kurt loves Swedish pastries. When he visited Stockholm in springtime, we had to go to several konditorier to taste all of the different semla so that he could rate which one was best. It's kind of like a Minnesota State Fair creative activities building exercise in Stockholm. The cafe in Alfsjö won. And when I was given the honor to return to ASI, accompanied by Gunnar in 2012, we wanted to give him something personal, and so we decided on some antique silver-plated cake forks. At traditional Swedish pastry shops, they provide you with these special forks so that you can eat princess cake properly. I think he appreciated the gift. This was Gunnar's first visit to US, and he loved it. We experienced friendly atmosphere, and together with Kurt, we set the table for Christmas in the mansion, and one could easily recognize Kurt's artistic talents when he assembled that tableau. We feel privileged to have known him, and we will always treasure Kurt's memory. Finally, I would like to quote a well-known poem by Alf Henriksen, a Swedish journalist and historian. Sometimes life stands still for a moment, and something completely unexpected happens. The world changes every day, but sometimes it is never quite the same again. All our love from Kerstin and Gunnar. Kurt was a tremendous gift to our community, the kind of person whose creative vision, approachable nature, and calm demeanor made him a joy to work with and widely respected, and we've heard evidence of that from everyone who has spoken here today. To Jean and to Mara, I hope you know how grateful we are that Kurt gave so much of himself to this place and to so many others in the community. Thank you for sharing him with us. We mourn his loss every day. Blessed be his memory. Sharon Bloom will perform 2 concluding pieces, at which point we can adjourn to the courtyard for complimentary donuts, pastries, and coffee. I don't think it's a reindeer blend, but it's good coffee. If you want something more substantial, Fika has set up a grill and is going to be grilling one of Kurt's favorite dishes, which is our riff on the cheese-filled hamburger. That's a Minneapolis classic, but since we're using Scandinavian cheese, we think of it as a juicy Lucia. Permit me to thank Fika and Culinaire for the support of this gathering. Many thanks to my colleagues who organized and supported today's program. I'm grateful to Barbara Glazier for providing the flowers. Along the link, just outside of the studio classroom, you'll find a place to view, again, the photographs that illustrate Kurt's life, as well as just an opportunity to sign a memory book. Please take some moments as well to visit the museum. It is a free admission day in honor of Kurt. And when you're in the Grand Hall, look up and see if you can spot those sexy bottoms on the cherubs. Thank you for being with us today.